Hi, folks. Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So, 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ryan. It's good to be here. Thanks.
Sure. Aaron, I know from our chats in the past that you've grown up in the Pacific Northwest. What was it like growing up in Pacific Northwest?
Oh, wow. Yeah, the Pacific Northwest in my mind is a really magical place. It's, the mountains come right down to the water. So you have this deep connection to our Puget Sound, the ocean, and the mountains. And you really get the sense of living deeply in the bioregion. And as a kid growing up, I got to spend a lot of time in the woods, playing in the woods, hiking in the woods, camping, climbing. And then I've spent a lot of time outside of the Pacific Northwest and lived in different parts of the world. And I certainly consider myself a Pacific Northwest boy, and keep coming back and love being here and having that deep connection nested between the mountains and the ocean. It's wonderful.
Where are some of the other places that you've lived when you're younger?
Well, it wasn't actually when I was younger. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, but then I moved and lived in Central Africa. I joined the Peace Corps and built schools and teachers' houses in a country called Gabon, so right on the equator. So lived in the tropics for about 3 years there, and then also lived in East Timor. My wife and I joined the Peace Corps for a second time and spent time kind of traveling all throughout Southeast Asia, and then an extended period of time in East Timor as they were just coming into their independence. So looking from, the perspectives of those different places back to the Pacific Northwest, I really, honestly, it would be hard for me to live any other place.
Yeah, I imagine that the heat in on the equator, at least in Central Africa, is pretty different
Right.
than Northwest.
That's right. And I am a fair-skinned individual, so I tend to cower after too much exposure to the sun. So the temperate climate of the Pacific Northwest is perfect for me. So, today it's 70 and sunny, and it doesn't get really that much hotter in the summer. So it's wonderful. And then the rain and the abundance of rain just is a constant reminder of how much life there is in our coastal temperate rainforests here. And we get a lot of wonderful snow in the mountains. So it's just, you kind of get the full gamut and really feel seasonality. Not that the tropics aren't wonderful. They absolutely are. and they're wonderful places to visit, but and call home for periods of time. But truly, where I will hang my hat um, is here, remains here.
Yeah, and so were those Peace Corps travels? Was that your first experience sort of with framing homes and like getting into home building, or was that?
Yeah, no. Actually, my first experience getting into home building was I my very first experience building was at a really young age, 15. I went on a volunteer program to the Fiji Islands, and in a really small rural community, a group of us built a dormitory that was kind of a community house for this village, and that's where I learned about level, making things level, and how do you actually square out a building by pulling diagonals. And then I came back from that experience really charged. And after I graduated from high school, I joined a friend of mine's brother built homes, and he needed somebody, and so I got engaged with him and started, as a lot of young men do, digging ditches and moving lumber and stacking roofing materials, and kind of as a general laborer, but ended up doing, over the course of the years that I worked in construction with him throughout college on different breaks and on holidays and in the summer. Working with him through, I learned all about the trades, and kind of ended up doing everything. We would sub out some things, but pretty much self-perform everything that we could in the houses. So I got really a lot of exposure to the gamut of the trades, and didn't really go super deep in too many of them, except a lot of concrete work during that time. And then that's where I had the skill set and the base, so that when I applied for Peace Corps, it was natural for me to go into a construction program. And that's where they had the construction equipment scolaire program in Gabon. So that was a real natural fit. And I didn't speak French, so that was a twist. I had to learn conversational French in order to do these projects and facilitate that. But that was just a part of the experience.
And then so it's so you had some home building experience, and then what were you working for in finance after that? Was it banking or?
Yeah. So when I came back from Peace Corps, so maybe just like a little bit to ground the conversation a little bit more in my story. So my parents got a divorce when I was 5, and I lived with my mom. My dad, he was a very successful banking entrepreneur, and he started a mortgage company and savings banks. And at a really early age, that's where I got this desire for social justice causes, and why I wanted to go into the Peace Corps and travel and help other people, because getting the opportunity to spend some time with my father, and then coming back home to my mom, who was always struggling to just get by. I mean, she would stuff my sister and I into the back of her car in the middle of the night and deliver papers by her car, and we would fold them up in the back and hand them to her. And then in the morning, she'd get up and race off to be a receptionist, and then come home and sell Mary Kay at night. And in between, she'd make my clothes that I'd wear to school. And then I'd have the antithetical experience of going to my dad's on occasion in this, a farm with woods and, more of a, very privileged lifestyle, and really feeling the unfairness of that, and, what is wrong here. And so after that Peace Corps experience in Central Africa, where I was building schools and teachers' houses, that kept hitting home for me, where in the villages, there's a lot of poverty, but it doesn't, the village life is agrarian based, and the community is really thick, and it's this really tight community. the worldview is so limited, and then you go to the provincial capitals and the poverty and the hopelessness that people feel is so great. And here I've got this I was, the fact that I'm simply born is just this random chance, and then I'm born into this opportunity where I've got privilege, and I thought to myself at that time, I can't not take advantage of this banking father's experience that I have access to, when so many other people, if they were given the opportunity, they would jump at that. So when I got done with Peace Corps, I went to my dad and I told him, I want to get into banking. And his jaw literally, hit the table. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, because he and I would fight. I mean, he was a suit. He was the man. He was the problem. And when he heard that, he got excited. And so that started for me, a period of my life for the better part of a decade. I worked in banking and with my dad at his company. And I learned all about banking from that. And then in 2006, he ended up selling a portion of the company, the mortgage and escrow company. And that's when I took the opportunity to try and create greater alignment in my life. So I left the business and started looking to align my values with the skill sets that I had. And at the time, I didn't really realize it was going to be, the combination of building and banking. But, these things, kind of like the flow of water, tend to find the path. And that's where Green Canopy really comes out of, is the combined skill sets of building and then banking and structured finance.
Yeah. So tell the folks about Green Canopy, and what is it, and what do you guys do?
Well, we are a deeply committed, mission-driven organization that our belief is that through the nexus of infill home building, we can help provide solutions for so many of our social and environmental challenges. So as a mission-driven organization, through the work of building deep green net zero energy homes in the urban infill space, we can create market transformation. So that's what we do. We build net zero energy homes in Seattle and Portland, and we're vertically integrated in several different manners. We're fund managers, so we manage real estate funds. We're a property developer, and then we're a general contractor. And within the general contracting company, we have an architecture firm business, and then a framing business. All of those service only our organization. But at some point in the pretty near future, some of those components will rotate out and start servicing third parties. And then we're bringing on a new piece of vertical integration. And to just a better understanding of the importance of what we're doing in our mind, and I don't want to make it sound more lofty than it is, because I think there's so many cool programs out there of people doing important work, but how we understand the problem of resource scarcity, climate change, and then social justice issues. Real estate occupies the nexus of a lot of these things. So on the environmental side, to give you an understanding, I think Drawdown talks about this pretty specifically, the solutions to reversing our global emissions. Many of those are ductless heat pumps, LED lighting, insulation, rooftop solar, and net zero energy buildings, kind of bringing all that together. Well, in Seattle and Portland combined, over the last 20 years, there has been only 10 net zero energy homes sold on the multiple listing services. 10 homes, net zero energy homes sold in the last 20 years. Now, there's been more than 10 built, and typically by high net worth individuals that are aligning their values to their lifestyle. But those homes don't transact. They don't typically transact. And what you need to create market transformation is transaction. And there needs to be a lot of transactions, especially in the real estate space, to create that market transformation so that we actually there's a demand and a pull for net zero energy homes. And why that's the case specifically in real estate is builders are not incentivized to innovate. In fact, there's a disincentive to innovate from the banking system. The banking system provides loans to builders, and they provide loans to builders to build product where there's evidence in the market of that product selling. So they do appraisals for what the potential value of this project would be. Well, when you don't have evidence in the market of net zero energy homes sold, there's no incentive for a builder to build net zero energy homes. And then, that's just one more step along the pathway towards scaling impact that we've been embarking on. That's not the paragon or the end goal for us, but it certainly is one of the steps that we want to do is transform markets to be more regenerative. And I use regenerative loosely, and we can talk more about how we think about regenerative real estate later, but to get more towards kind of on that Fullerton scale, towards the regenerative end of that Fullerton scale. And taking homes net zero energy is important for that. And so now we're talking about market transformation from an environmental perspective, but you don't get true market transformation if you're delivering homes for one end of the social income spectrum. So creating market transformation that has has a broad base of impact means you also have to be thinking about affordable and greater access and affordability to these solutions. And in particular, in real estate, where real estate has essentially over the centuries has been weaponized, and it's been weaponized to keep historically marginalized communities and groups historically marginalized. And in the United States, there's kind of a double whammy of that, where land was usurped from First Nations, and then we employed slave labor to build our infrastructure and didn't allow people to own property. And then when communities of color were allowed to own property, the system and structure was stacked against them, and then it wouldn't lend to them. And that went all the way up, redlining all the way up to the 70s. And when the largest form of wealth creation is in America, and the transfer of wealth comes from the ownership of real estate, and you have populations that weren't allowed or structurally removed from the ownership of real estate, you don't have the opportunity to create or transfer wealth in the current paradigm that we're in. So real estate is really seen as, for some, as a divisive wedge that separates people, but it can also be used as something to bring communities together. And truly, that's where regenerative starts in our mind, is in focusing on those relationships and rebuilding and regenerating relationships. And before you can get to relationships, it starts with you as an individual. So bringing it all the way back to the person. So what we do in real estate has, a real interpersonal, personal. We take a real personal approach that then expands to the communities in which we build, that we're bringing in greater access and affordability through different funding structures that we can talk about. And typically, this is another thing that we really focus on and recognize at the company, that so often our social and environmental challenges are decoupled, and you have groups that focus on social issues or providing solutions, social solutions, and then folks that are providing environmental solutions or climate solutions or whatever, where we see that our social and environmental solutions and challenges are inextricably linked. And they think of them as the yin and the yang of a new paradigm that we're working to create. So when we historically decouple them, and especially in the real estate or housing development world, where you have affordable housing developers that try and layer in sustainability, we haven't seen sustainable home builders layer in affordability, and there hasn't been a real drive to firmly integrate those two. And in the interconnectedness of that, there's real opportunity that we continue to try and nurture, foster, and realize as an organization. So there was a lot there, but that's Green Canopy through the work that we're doing in Seattle and Portland, trying to rebuild relationships in communities and create more sustainable, more inclusive micro communities, if you will, in the single family fee simple space. So these aren't multifamily apartment, affordable housing apartment projects. These are urban infill, single family row houses, townhouses in desirable walkable neighborhoods of Seattle and Portland.
And talk about urban infill, and like I've seen one of the videos I think you showed me at one point where it was a single family home on one lot, but then you built something that was like three places to live in one plot. Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah. So actually that's a really good topic to think about. And certainly we've done a lot of thinking. Our first projects, as we got started, we bought our first project in 2009, and our approach at the time was a different housing crisis altogether. It was a crisis of confidence. Everybody was trying to sell homes. Nobody was trying to buy homes. Property values were collapsing. And at that time, we had a commitment that one of the most resource efficient things we can do is take these existing homes and remodel them and these existing homes we had a commitment. We were never going to buy off the foreclosure steps. We weren't going to buy financially distressed properties. We didn't buy from the banks. We bought off the multiple listing service. And at that time, you could get really physically distressed homes that were tilting, that typical builder or developer would go in and demolish and then rebuild a new home. So we went in to these homes and we would do deep green remodels. And we were the first people doing ductless heat pumps in these. In fact, at the time when we started, I think there were only 7 built green remodels in our area out of about 10,000 certified built green homes. And so we got our start that way, and about our first 50 homes were these deep remodels. And then the market started to change, and we started to exit out of one housing crisis, and rapidly, especially when we look back, it looks a lot faster than how it felt, but we started to move pretty quickly into another housing crisis. And also the opportunities to get these physically distressed homes started to go away as people were looking for value on the market. So individual homeowners would now start buying these things and say, okay, we'll remodel it, right? So we couldn't viably continue, but then we also started to learn firsthand the importance of density as it relates to our cities, where people have been saying for quite a while that there's this big resurgence to urbanity and people coming into the cities, and there's going to continue to be more and more people coming to our cities over the decades to come, especially from a lot of our environmental changes that are happening. But during the recession, you didn't feel that. Well, when we started to get out of that recession, there was this real importance to start looking at our buildable lands as the scarce resource. And where there's one house, that means typically only someone of a certain income level can afford to buy that house. So we rotated from remodeling existing homes to now we deconstruct the home and put in added density, creating greater access and actually lowering the price point entry for people to get into certain neighborhoods. And then we've taken that in 2012, we started an affordable program with the Washington State Housing Finance Commission it was a program, or is a program, where they provide capital to us if our properties hit their intersection of affordability and sustainability. And then we're taking that now a step further, where we're on each of these sites where we're adding increased density, and sometimes it's one lot, and sometimes it's two lots, and you're doing assemblage, so you're getting 10 different homes or row houses on a project site. Now we're taking that in our next funding structure, where we're reserving 25% of every project site for rent for families that earn 80% AMI or below. And that's that missing middle, that wedge between 80 and 60% AMI that is getting really pushed out of the cities that we're in. So we're taking that focus, and then the homes that we deconstruct, we've been working with a workforce training program here for the last 3 years, where they come in, and the communities that they serve are recently incarcerated individuals and current and former gang members, where they'll come in and get at the framing members. So we work with our excavators, where the excavator will kind of part out the house, and then this group, it's called 118 Design, they will come in, and it's for the community within the 98118 zip code. They'll come in and cut out these framing members. These old framing members are old growth fir right out of these forests, back in the early 1900s. And then they take those framing members back to their wood shop, and they teach these men wood shop skills. And they build many of the reclaimed clad walls that go into our new homes. They create furniture, reclaimed furniture that they sell as part of their revenue model. And then we also work with our resellers. So they come in, and really we take these old homes and repurpose as much as we possibly can. And then the rest go into large recycle containers. So trying to responsibly rebuild our cities to accommodate more and more people. You got it.
Yeah. And one of the other unique things about Green Canopy that I love, I don't think I've seen it anywhere else, is you'd mentioned finance and obviously starting the business, the financial collapse, historical discrimination, systemic racism within finance, and the Green Canopy creating its own funds to sort of basically say, we're going to go around the whole getting a loan from a bank industry to finance. We're just going to actually raise capital directly. Like, can you talk about what was your what's that strategy like, and what have you been doing with your funds?
So the strategy. So Green Canopy took a really atypical approach to start as a home builder. In fact, we don't know any other home builder in the country that started much like a software company would, by raising money from outside investors and selling shares. So we have a history of working with the impact investment community here in the Pacific Northwest, but also throughout the country. We have investors from all over the country at this point. So in the company itself, we have roughly 60 shareholders, all of which are impact investors. And then fairly early on, again, banks don't lend when you're doing innovative projects, and they certainly weren't lending at the time when we were starting to start up home builders. So we went to our impact investment community here in the Pacific Northwest, and we started working with key individuals around creating funds. So we created in 2012 our first fund, and then that led to our next fund, the Alder Fund, and then the Birch Fund. And these are designed for the impact investment community to be able to invest in really helping to create the future that we all envision, and to continue to do that in a way that scales impact. So our fourth fund is the Cedar Fund, and that's a structure that's designed to be really resilient and scale impact at the same time. So in the Cedar Fund, all of those properties our targeted net zero energy. And again, as I mentioned before, 25% of every project site reserved for families that earn 80% AMI to rent. And then after the fund has gone through its fund cycle, all of the properties will be sold, with 25% of those properties going into community land trusts, so held in permanent affordability in land trusts for in families in Portland and Seattle. What we've done with this fund is something that's also quite unique, and something I'm really proud of, in that we haven't seen, not that it's not out there, but we haven't seen it, is that we've created an impact oversight body. It's called the Cedar Fund Impact Collaborative, and it's an 18-member stakeholder group from the ecosystem. So we've got affordable housing developers, we've got foundations, funders, building science experts, we've got experts in impact metrics, CDFIs, and this group will then be given shared information from the fund, and they will be looking at how do we scale impact and create greater impact while maintaining the target rate of return. And there's lots of opportunities that we can look at to do that. That's one charge of that oversight body. So how do we continue to scale impact, report on it? But then also, how do we think about replication? What can we learn from this initiative that we can do elsewhere? For example, we don't know how multi-generational 80% AMI households utilize energy or behavior within a net zero energy home next to a market rate homeowner, and it's the same style home. And we'll get to monitor and evaluate that over the course of the fund. We'll get to monitor and evaluate the development process and how we're working with municipalities on entitlements, and can we help inform what they're doing to the benefit of scaled impact. And the purpose of having funders on that impact collaborative, we have two foundations, is so that they can actually fund research on the activities within the Cedar Fund, and then be able to promote that and share that as a field building activity, so that we can create, hopefully, replication elsewhere around the country. And we've already been talking with other groups from Baltimore, from North Carolina, from Denver, Colorado, actually, and different groups around the country, to share what we're doing and try and share best practices, so that we can get other models like this. And all of this we can do without reliance on government subsidies. So that's another thing that we're really excited about, to be able to navigate around the traditional banking world, but then also to be able to not rely on government subsidies, creates, again, resilient models that allow for greater scale, greater community input. And to us, I think that's something that's really important, how we're trying to, and I know the Lift Economy crew talks about it this way, but as we are hospicing, the old economic paradigm and then trying to midwife in a new economic paradigm, we're kind of on that hospice curve of trying to bend the current paradigm to something that's more of a joint powered sharing dynamic, where you've got community land trust, community involvement, impact oversight, but still generating returns. And that's very much aligned with our organization's theory of change.
I love that. And we had briefly talked about something, two of the other initiatives that you're working on that are pretty exciting, the Access Solar Program and the FSC panel company. Oh, yeah. Could you speak about those two things?
Sure. First, I want to talk about the Access Solar Program. This is not something that Green Canopy started, and it's because we're in this ecosystem. It's something, though, that we get to actually help bring into the world. So the Access Solar is a joint initiative between Spark Northwest and Emerald City, Seattle. And it's actually designed to expand solar energy access to organizations and communities that have been left out of the transition to clean energy because of the barriers related to policy, capacity, financing, these things that we've been talking about. So those organizations are nonprofit, affordable housing providers, and those tenants. So they're creating an LLC where Green Canopy will function as the for-profit sponsor. So in that LLC then is the tax equity vehicle with the community-oriented investors to provide the capital to projects, and thereby you sell the tax credits. This provides capital to apply solar on affordable housing buildings for affordable housing providers. So on-site solar energy that reduces and stabilizes electricity rates for affordable housing providers and keeps that housing affordable longer, right? And then secondly, when we're able to plug in the community solar program from Washington State, the Community Solar Initiative, that allows residents to be eligible to receive a portion of the incentive for the solar that's being generated on their building. So now the tenants also get shared benefit in having that solar, but they need a for-profit partner to be part of that. And actually there's several folks, different organizations that are part of this lattice work. That's a collaborative to bring together an initiative to create greater access to solar for families and the affordable housing providers. So that's something that we're really excited about and proud to be a part of, and really just call out the work of Spark Northwest and Emerald City, Seattle, and the folks that are committed to working on that. It's a really innovative structure, and I know that's something that too they're excited about sharing with other groups. And then one of the initiatives that we're working on as an organization, independent of the Access Solar Program, you mentioned an FSC framing panel company. So one of our board members is EcoTrust. They sit on our board. We've worked with them over a number of years. Great group, and they harvest or manage 70,000 acres. Actually, EcoTrust Forest Management, EFM, they manage 70,000 acres. I think, yeah, you recently interviewed Bettina, acres of FSC certified timber. There's a really big problem in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, and Seattle, and that those FSC supply chains are largely broken. It is incredibly difficult to get FSC wood into our homes. None of the lumber yards provide it. And so this is something we've been looking at along with EFM and EcoTrust and Northwest Natural Resource Group and others here in the Pacific Northwest to try and figure out for a while. And maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, we started panelizing some of our homes, which means you buy framed panels from a panel manufacturer, and then those get trucked to site, and then you assemble the panels on the house. It's a lot less waste. It's faster to assemble on site, and we had some difficulty working with the panel companies around customer service and timeliness, but we went through a process, did several of these homes, learned a lot. And have tried to work with them to help refine the process with them. But then when we started looking at the FSC supply chain, we thought, wait a second, there's a real interesting opportunity. So over the last 9 months, we started looking at what does it take to start a framing panel company? And then it's actually been about a year we've been looking at that. And in that period of time, the cost of lumber has just started skyrocketing and going through the roof. So what we've learned is this is entirely doable for our organization. So we're right now really excited to be kind of on the front end of building out a framing panel manufacturing company here in Seattle that'll service both our locations, Seattle and Portland. And we're able to work with EFM and Northwest Natural Resource Groups and those farms to complete the supply chain to the mill. We have a few mills that we haven't yet talked to, but we're feel really confident about those mills, that the panel company will be able to buy the FSC certified material directly from the mill. When you can buy directly from the mill, you eliminate markup from the lumber yard, which is fairly significant, and it allows us to perhaps navigate that price parity paradox, which is the cost of sustainable materials are more sustainable materials, and in this case, truly a regenerative material that sequesters 45% more carbon than industry timber, because your harvest rotations are longer, and there's less toxicity, all sorts of wonderful benefits. We can do that, and it costs more, but we may be able to offer the panels at par pricing to third parties. So the goal would be to eventually rotate this out and not just provide panels for our company, but for other people. And then there is this benefit in that we've learned that you don't need a lot of experience, and we already work with workforce organizations here in the Pacific Northwest. So we're interested in folding in, again, integrating that yin and yang opportunity set, social and environmental, integrating workforce training into actually the construction of the panels in the warehouse. So our goal is to be able to build FSC certified panels. And again, this is like structurally, you get a choice. You can either buy an FSC certified panel or an FSC certified panel. There's no choice. This is what we want to provide to the market. And the goal is to do it for the same price as industry commodity product, and then be able to bring in workforce. That's ambitious, and we're really excited to kind of be on that trail right now, and hopefully later this year that'll get off the ground.
And maybe as we're
Go ahead.
moving to the last few questions here, I'm curious what you see as the future of home building, or let's say like 50 or 100 years. Is it modular prefab, or is it all community living? Like what do you think? What are you forecasting for the 50 to 100 year timeline?
Yeah, 50 to 100 year timeline. That's wonderful. I mean, how far out should we go? Given that these structures are going to be on the face of the planet long after we're dead and gone. So, what I think about the future of building, McKinsey Global Institute wrote a report this time last year. They produced it, I think, in February 2017, and it talked about the last category in our economy that has not seen any productivity gains to speak of is construction. It hasn't changed for generations. It's been done the same way for a very long time. It's a highly fragmented marketplace, and innovation's coming. And it really needs to come. So I point to the book New Carbon Architecture that just was released this last year. The future of home building really is thinking of our buildings and our structures as carbon sinks. So again, getting into that notion of drawdown and how are we drawing down and reversing our carbon emissions. When you're building 6 billion square feet of infrastructure every year. As a country, the U.S. is currently building 6 billion square foot a year, and we're demolishing about 1 billion square foot. And the vast majority of what we're building every year is residential. 4.5 billion of what we build every year is residential, and 1.5 is commercial. We have to take our infrastructure and our buildings into, again, that more regenerative, and certainly take our structures and start thinking and creating them to be carbon sinks, and thinking about them as how do we use them to sequester carbon and reverse that. So the New Carbon Architecture is a book that talks about that. The Carbon Leadership Forum is an initiative out of the University of Washington that has been working on this for several years. So how we see the future of it and how we've been able to do what we're doing, which is bringing net zero energy homes at a scale. Right now, we have out of the 140 homes in our pipeline, we have 80 that are being built as net zero energy homes to hit the market where there's only been 10 homes sold in Seattle and Portland. So how we're able to do that is through efficiency in the production. So creating a production management platform that creates efficiency, weeds out inefficiency, so that we can take the economies or the savings from being really efficient project managers and communicators and scaling impact. That's what's going to happen as we continue to go forward, and we'll see the proliferation of more materials like hempcrete, rammed earth, definitely regenerative biomass material. FSC is an example of that, but straw bale and climates at work. We're going to see solar become much more prolific, and we've got a long way to go with a lot of these, what we typically think of as sustainable materials like ductless heat pumps and solar panels, because if we did the life cycle analysis on those, we'd see they're far from a regenerative product, and there's a lot of waste and chemical, and it can make and we haven't even talked about concrete and iron and those sorts of things that go into our homes. So over time, Green Canopy and others, I'm sure, I'm hoping, will continue to incrementally scale and innovate, and that will mean there will be a high degree of modulation, because you get a lot of efficiency. You can house more people with less product, and then modulation allows you to scale impact and create our structures into carbon sinks. And where we're going 50 to 100 years is, yes, you're going to see a lot more housing options, community housing options, cooperative housing options. We're going to continue to evolve and think about housing. I know there's lots of people questioning even the ownership of land, and these things take a long time. The transfer of energy from one energy base to another takes, generations. And when we talk about the life cycle of a home, you don't see innovation happening quickly when it takes sometimes 2 to 3 years to develop a product. You see rapid innovation in software, but chairs, watches, cars, where you can quickly build something, you can rapidly iterate and innovate. Housing has longer life cycles, gestation cycles, so it takes longer to innovate. However, innovation's coming, and necessity being the mother of innovation, we have the constant growth problem, and I'm not talking about the economy. And as long as we're not really willing or capable to address our population growth issues, we have to continue to think about how we're going to provide housing and infrastructure in a way that's more aligned with a regenerative future, and the future that we're working to create. And it's a real exciting thing from a home builder's perspective, or somebody that's focused on housing, because again, these structures are going to live on the face of the planet long after we're dead and gone. So when we are creating this, we're actually sending messages to future generations around our intentionality and how we want to see the world as something that is more egalitarian and more place-based, community-oriented, and in balance with the bioregions in which we build. These are things that we have to address as we continue to move forward as a population and a society. Yeah.
I know you have to jump to a meeting soon, but maybe in the last
Mm-hmm.
few questions here, what do you need right now? And is there anything that the listeners can help you with in growing this next economy?
Yeah. I think, just philosophically, as we're out there in the world, I think it's just really important. You and I have talked about this at different times. I think what's helpful for me, and again, at a philosophical level, is to have grace with each other. And, the arc of impact and the impact that we want to create in the world is also, similar to the arc of hypocrisy. And we all reside on that arc of hypocrisy somewhere. And to understand that, there are different solutions, and it takes lots of different solutions. And sometimes as people, we think that when I come to the realization of something, then we tend to look down on other people that haven't come to that realization or that understanding. And I think that having grace with each other that are really unfolding into the awareness that there are different ways of behaving, and some of us are at different stages of growth and thought, and that no one's pure in any sense. I think that gives us all a lot of grace, and it also allows for a lot more solutions to arise to the surface. It certainly gives people more space and the freedom to offer solutions and ideas. And I think that there's the sense of urgency can feel so great that we just have to move and yes, and let's engage in conversation and community to make sure that we know we're moving in the right direction, or the best direction that we can muster or we can think of. And let's have grace with other people that may not be at that same point on the curve that we're on, and work to also, I think, Paul Hawken talks about this, fighting change. It's just like, can we get away from fighting change? And I think about, I don't hate my racist, sexist grandfather. I don't like those attributes about him, but at the end of the day, I love my sexist, racist grandfather. I wish there were things that are different, but I don't want to fight against him. I want to fight or not fight. I want to try and move toward something. And, these are things that at a very philosophical level, I think help change the collective consciousness, which helps me and what we're trying to do. And we are all part of the collective consciousness, and we all are creating the future, whether we know it or not. So if we have that own personal realization that maybe I don't have the corner on all the right ideas, and that I'm open to the unfolding of this, then I actually have changed that collective consciousness slightly. And that means I'm changing the future and creating the future. So, just have grace with each other as we're working on these issues collectively, and seek to learn and listen and understand and link arms. And I think that's like, gosh, if we could all do that, how helpful would it be,
And where can folks?
And that goes to me too. Yeah. Right. I succumb.
Where can folks learn more about Green Canopy?
Oh, where can they learn more about Green Canopy? Well, greencanopy.com. And if you want to reach out to me, you can as well. Aaron at Green Canopy. Happy to share what we're working on, what we're doing, and how we're going about doing it. Whether you're somebody in a different part of the country that wants to do something like what we're doing, or build net zero energy homes, or we're happy to share how we funding structures, how we create the product that we do, how we think about quality, et cetera. So we're really open to helping other people advance. And if anybody's further along the learning curve than we are, please reach out and help us advance too. We're all working together.
I love that. And I just really want to appreciate you. I know you kind of were saying that Green Canopy is on the hospice curve, but with some of the things you've mentioned around homes being, part of the largest piece of wealth transfer, and construction industry lagging behind all other industries, it is really innovative what you're doing. And so just want to appreciate you for helping build that part of the next economy.
Thanks, Ryan. It's really nice. I appreciate that. Thank you. And, back at you with what you're doing with Lift Economy.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.